Perfect. So yeah, I've already said that we would kind of go through tips and Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I said because they're what we have. We also have a LinkedIn, but I don't manage it. Someone else does. So if you have, I don't know if you guys have LinkedIn. If you have any questions, I can pass them on. And I guess the other big one at the moment is TikTok, which we don't have at the moment, but might get. But I can't really offer any any TikTok. I feel old. I don't have it. And then the idea is
Agree
yeah,
on that.
yeah. God, I was in a meeting today and we were talking about like students and we were like, would students do this? And I was like, oh my God, I feel so old being like, what would students do? And then yeah, we can talk maybe if you have some questions or other, because there's always so much new stuff, new tools and stuff in socials. There might be something someone's found useful and wants to share. So the first thing I think is useful when thinking about social media is kind of what your voice is, what your tone of voice is. So when I used to work at BBC Food, they used to say we're like on social media, we're like Delia Smith's cooler, kind of younger cousin. So like we still know a lot about food and not about cooking, but maybe slightly trendier. And I think that's kind of a useful way to think about it, especially if you've got more than one person working on your social media so that it can be kind of consistent. So I kind of think of at feedback, I think of like we're cool, but and kind of fun, but we also know our stuff and we have a lot of research and reports. So I kind of think of it like we're cool, but we still know our stuff. Another one that I think is a strong voice that I put in is just, I mean, whether you hate them or not, is the innocent drinks. Have quite a big presence on social media. Um, and yeah, I think when I used to work with, they always tweet around Bake Off and stuff as well, and I can always tell when it's their stuff. So I think trying to figure out what your kind of tone of voice is and what you're trying to say is a good starting point. So then the second thing I think with social media is, as it's obviously gotten so much bigger now, I think a lot of people think sometimes like, oh, we'll just do a little bit of social media and get these like great results. But I think the reality is you kind of get what you put in. So for instance, again, when I worked at BBC Food, like our Twitter following their Twitter account has like 400,000 people, followers, but there was two people working on it full time. So I think it's trying to be realistic with what your time is and what your budget is. Because you can still do a lot without having loads of time and budget, but any really big account that's doing super well, they will definitely have like one person whose only job is to do social media. So to maybe not get caught like comparing yourself to that. So yeah, I think it's important to consider how much time you have and also what budget you have. And I think what can be helpful for that is obviously there's so many platforms now. And if you're struggling across platforms to maybe focus on one, and it would obviously make sense to focus on where your audience is. So if you think the people you're trying to reach are more on Instagram, or are they more on Twitter or Facebook, and put more effort into that. And then also I think to use insights and analytics, which I have a bit more on later, to kind of maximize your impact. So for instance, you can see on like what your audience looks like on Facebook, and then maybe you want to tailor your content a bit more to that, or you can see what time people tend to view your stuff. And then maybe, test things and see when do we get more engagement, say on a Sunday morning or a Saturday afternoon. And that way, hopefully you'll get more from doing the same thing. The second thing is just to be social. So I was talking to my colleague who used to work at Greenpeace, and he was saying it's a network, not a broadcast channel. So kind of treat it like you would any other social situation, and don't just stand in the corner of the room shouting about yourself. I often find that when I first started working on social media for an organization, I would kind of quite overthink sometimes what to write, but when I would be doing it from my own account, I wouldn't do that. Obviously within reason, like I probably wouldn't like swear from the feedbacks account, for example, but I think it's still sometimes good for it to feel like there's a person, and maybe so don't think too much about, oh, how would one say this or this? Like think about it like as in it is a social thing. You're kind of essentially just trying to communicate with people. So yeah, I put down there like have conversations with people. Like I always try to respond to any comments we get on the platforms, or if someone sends us a message. And then I don't know if you guys, we get some trolls at feedback. I've put in don't feed the trolls. Our kind of policy on that is if someone's clearly just being difficult, we just ignore them. If it's someone being a bit annoying, but maybe they have a valid question, we just like give them a standard response and then kind of move on. But I wouldn't put too much energy into that. Then I think things that can also work well are like sharing certain moments or behind the scenes content. So, you know, when we used to do a lot more events, kind of stuff in the run up to events can be quite nice. So you're giving people a kind of glimpse into what you're doing, or even, you know, sometimes pictures from, say, what we were doing, a feedback in the office if we were all having lunch together, like things like that. So again, it's just a bit more personable. And again, in terms of being social, we quite often share other people's content. Obviously, you have to be conscious that we're not only just sharing other people's and also doing our own, but I think that can be a good way as well. And then also you can ask people to share yours in return. So then I've written about if you're trying to maximize, I think, oh yeah, buck, there's a pun there for bucks. Anyway, if you're trying to get the most out of it, if you have limited time and money, I find scheduling stuff quite helpful. I always schedule stuff over the weekend or around big events like Christmas. So I know that I've got certain things in for every day or however many days I can. Both Facebook and Twitter will let you schedule. They have scheduling tools within themselves. Instagram, you'd have to use a different thing. Like we tend to use Hootsuite because you can't do it itself on Instagram. So I think that can be useful, especially if you find it maybe easier to, say, block 2 hours in your week and do a lot of your social media scheduling then, rather than trying to do it every day. And then you maybe just check in on it a bit every day. It depends, but I think that, and then at least you know you've got something. So if things get crazy, you've got at least 1 or 2 things going out. I've also written evergreen content, so kind of creating content that you can use a lot. So maybe like a very general video about what you do, or images with, you know, maybe quotes on them that you can use a few times, can make it a bit easier than, because sometimes, or even then editing videos as well. So I have sometimes taken videos that we used for a certain event, but just cut off the thing at the end that was like, come to this event. So just trying to get the most out of the content you have, so you're not constantly having to make content. And then, yeah, as I said earlier, to use analytics and insight to maximize them. So to see, you know, when's the best time to post, or how can you get the most from it. And then particularly for Facebook, but in general now, if you've got a big, something you really want to promote a lot, you kind of have to, it can sometimes, I think, in terms of time and money trade-off, save you a lot of time to budget for some paid promotion. Even if it's, say, like 50 quid or something, we do that quite a lot. And I think in the terms of the time you might take putting out the posts, it will save you that in the long run. But we'll talk a bit more about that when we get to Facebook. Then on amplifying your message, what we do is if we have a report launch or an event, tend to create a social media pack to send to people. So it's as easy as it can be for them to share it. That will usually have images they can share, tweets already written, so they just have to copy and paste them, and things like that. So that will make it, you just want to make it as easy as you can for someone else to share what you want them to share. And then I've just written who can share. We often come up with a list of people in our network, but also potential influencers that we want to maybe ask if they can share it. And then I think something that was a bit more popular before, but people still do, is this idea of having a kind of Twitter storm or a day of action. So one day where you're trying to get a lot of people to tweet about a particular thing using the same hashtag, or I guess you could also do that on Instagram. We used a new tool last month called Digital Activist to get people to all, it's like you can preload in tweets, and So then all people can kind of choose a tweet. So there's not just one. And it had quite a lot of people basically tweeting this at a certain person on a day. So that can be useful as well. And then I know we talked about images and stuff before, but I just put in that I think it's good if you can try use the correct size. So that's kind of, like 16:9 like that for Twitter, and a square in order for Instagram. Pretty much all of them will let you edit the images in them, but it's good if you're taking images to maybe keep that in mind. If you know you want to use it on Twitter, like will it crop that way? And then to try not to put too much text on images, particularly if you want to do ads. Facebook sometimes won't let you have an image with too much text. And then, well, I always joke that people always say, like, I want this to go viral. And there isn't obviously like a viral button you can press. But I think a good question that I often ask myself is kind of like, would I share this if I saw this on social media? And yeah, just kind of considering whether you think it's getting across what you want it to, is whatever image or video you're using attractive to people. And yeah, because there isn't unfortunately like a making it viral button yet. Oh, I see there's a question, sorry. So the social media pack would be we would normally, depending on what it was, but if say we were putting out, so say for instance, if the Gluts cookbook, I would put together, all the people in our network who that would be relevant to. So we might send it to people like Sustain, I say some of you know, who are like another organization, a coalition that we're part of. And some other like there's, who we don't do stuff around food and cooking, and ask them to share it. And then if there were some influencers we'd engaged with before, we might send it to them as well. So it kind of depends what it is, but it's basically anyone who you either have a relationship or you're trying to make a relationship with, that you think will share your stuff. And yeah, so, and then if it's an event, it would be, because before we've had them for like everyone who's been involved in an event so that it looks consistent. So it might be you send it to all the speakers or whatever organizations are involved in the event. And then how often do you advise people to post? I would say like kind of the more the better, but at the same time, I think it's good to be consistent. So if you can it's rather than doing say loads 1 week and then none for 2 weeks, it will be better to, if you think, okay, I can manage to do one every second day and then stick to that, rather than maybe being super active and then totally dropping off. Yeah, so people kind of know roughly what to expect. So then on Facebook, I think if you haven't used it already, the Facebook Insights is actually quite good. There's quite a lot of stuff in there. It's you don't have to pay for it. So this is just one example of, you can look at who your followers are. So this is feedback's one. A lot more women than men, which is the case across all of our platforms. I don't know if that's just like a food thing or but that's literally the case for every single one of our platforms. So it'll also give you a breakdown by age group. So we're not doing a great job there at attracting 18 to 24s, but doing better at different age. So yeah, it'll let you see things like this. And we've had chats then before about like, do we want to try and make more male content? I'm not sure what that would be, or focus on say the people we have, but at least you can see what you have already. And it will also let you see like that, like where people are based, what countries, what city, the language. There's lots of other stuff in there, like you can see what posts got the most reach. Yeah, so it's worth definitely, if you haven't, like going in and having a kind of play around in it, and yeah, checking, especially if you're trying to make some sort of social media plan to see what your baseline is. And then Facebook ads. So maybe some of you know that Facebook has this algorithm. They don't really tell you what it is, and it changes sometimes, but at the moment basically it's quite hard to get your post seen by a lot of people unless you're a very popular account or you do ads. So what someone told me that is if you get 10% of your, whatever your audience, so say we have like 25,000, like the feedback Facebook page, 10% of organic reach, so not paying for an ad, is good. So that would be, say, 2,500 people seeing the post, which we get sometimes, but not that often. So if there's something you really want to get across, you kind of, I think, maybe have to do an ad for it. When you go to create an ad, you'll get a thing like this, which will ask you like what you're trying to achieve from the ad. Normally, I want the traffic one, which is getting more people to the link that I'm putting in. But yeah, there are different options there. There's also video views. So we have used Facebook ads. If we have, you know, last year I worked on an animation that we spent some money on, so we wanted to make sure people saw it. So we used Facebook ads for that. Yeah, there's lots of different things. I'll check in the chat again. Our hashtags are through on Facebook. I think they're fine, but I think it won't, like, they're not, I don't think they make a massive difference on Facebook. So I wouldn't worry about them too much.
So would you just say hashtags are probably, where would you say hashtags are best placed?
So Twitter, the main one, and then Instagram as well. Yeah. So, I mean, so Facebook ads, I haven't got into much more detail on them here, but if people have questions, we can talk about it afterwards. What I would say they're good for is, I'm just gonna make this smaller because it's doing this, but is it can be quite cheap. Like even if you just have, say, 30 quid, you can actually get quite a lot of people to see it. Then it's, you know, it will measure like how many people saw it and how many people actually clicked on it and stuff. You can also create certain audiences. So you can say like people who live in Box, and in theory, people who say they're interested in food and various things. So it can be quite useful for that. But yeah, so it's worth considering. I think especially if you have some budget for promotion, it might be a better use of money than maybe like having an ad in a paper or something, depending on what you want to do. We've definitely used it for events and stuff and found it quite good. And then I've just said on Facebook video that it is better to upload a video directly to Facebook if you can, and try to avoid using YouTube links, because YouTube's owned by Google, the Facebook will kind of like not, the algorithm won't let as many people see it as if you directly upload it to Facebook. And I've also said to keep it short, that the short videos work better on Facebook, and to try use captions or subtitles because people tend to watch it without the volume. Is it worth sharing your own post to other pages you started to increase views? I'll just read this out. Is it worth sharing your own post to other pages you started to increase views, or does that make it less likely for it to rank higher? No, I think it's worth doing that. I think it's better if other people share it. So sometimes, for instance, at Facebook, like I will ask people, if we have an event on Facebook, I'll ask the feedback staff to be like, can you say you're going to this event, even if you're not, just because I want Facebook to think more people are going. So I think it's if you can ask a friend to share it or something, it's better because it looks like more people are engaging with it. But I think it's still probably worth you sharing it. Okay, I'll move on to Twitter, but we can, if you have more questions on Facebook, we can move back to it. Again, Twitter has its own analytics that is also free and quite useful. It will tell you things like who your top follower that month is. So sometimes you'll like, okay, well, BBC Food started following us. I know they have a big account, but sometimes it'll be a random person that I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know this person. And then maybe you're like, maybe I should message them, depending on who it is. It will also tell you things like what your top tweet of the month was, or whatever. There's also a tool called Follower Wonk, which is quite good. It gives you lots more information on the people who are following you. But it is a paid for tool. You can get some stuff on it for free, so it's worth going in and having a quick look. But if you want to get like all this, yeah, Follower Wonk. I will put the.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise they put.
Don't worry. but yeah, that can be quite good if you want to get a sense of more of your followers and stuff. And then that's more from Twitter analytics. It can be useful, I think, if you want to see, like, this is over the last month for us, and obviously there are certain days we did a lot better than others, and then sometimes it'll be really obvious. It'll be like, oh, that's the day we launched that report. But there's been times where I'm like, why did we do so well that day? And it might be that a somewhat high profile person shared something and I hadn't realized, and then it can be good to maybe go back and see if you can engage with that person, or yeah, whatever. So then I've written for amplifying your message. It can be good to tag people, I think, in the images you use. That can be a good way of engaging with some people. I find it depends who it is. If it's someone you have like no relationship with, they probably won't share it. But if it's someone who you have a relationship with, that can work. And then to have content for days that, like, that day will trend on Twitter, like World Book Day, World Environment Day, World Food Day. It's kind of, I guess, a toss-up, because the only downside is everyone else is doing stuff for World Book Day too. But it is still sometimes useful, I think, to have stuff for that, because you know it's going to trend. And similarly, pretty much every week, Monday motivation will trend, Wednesday wisdom, Thursday thoughts. So if you're going to be scheduling stuff, it can be useful. I sometimes try to use those, so at least I know I'm going to get some maybe pick up. And then also, again, this depends on how much time you have, but if you have a chance to look at social media on a day, you might see that there's a random hashtag trending that you're like, oh, we actually might have something for this. So for example, once like International Carrot Day was trending, and I just put this image up and it got like 344 retweets. It's just random that I didn't even know it was International Carrot Day before then. So sometimes you might just see something trending that you happen to think, oh, we actually have good content that would fit for this, and you can maybe like kind of piggyback off the fact that that's doing well. I've written then to make sure the tweet's easy to read. I think sometimes people do this thing where they think, I'm going to put in all the hashtags so lots of people see it. But I just saw this came up on my feed today, and I thought it was a kind of good bad example of that, of like, I think it'd be quite hard to read when there's loads like that. And also people will, if you add an account, it will be blue as well, and if it's just like all like that, it can be quite difficult to read. So I think it's good to try not have more than 3 kind of blue things, so either hashtags or adding accounts, because it just makes it harder to read. And I think the same with, like, in general, the same kind of rule of like less is more. Sometimes just because you have X amount of characters doesn't mean your tweet has to be that long. If you can say it with less and a shorter thing, then I think that's better. So then onto Instagram. So with Instagram, you do get insights, but you have to set up a business account. And then you get similar to kind of Facebook, like you can get stuff about the audience, you can get stuff about what time of day, but yeah, you do have to. But it's not that hard to set up an Instagram business account. I did it for feedback. And then I've just written some ideas of like to use what you have to be creative. So for instance, for World Book Day, this is me. This picture did quite well just because I guess it is striking. And then also we did a thread of books that people at feedback recommended, so I just took pictures of the books, so that's just one. Just something kind of simple, but we tagged the authors, and then that got some traction, and it did pretty well. So yeah, obviously there's people on Instagram who are spending a lot of money and time getting amazing photographs, but sometimes I think if you can use what you have to try create some good stuff. So similarly, sometimes there will be something trending, and what can you contribute? So I don't know if people remember, in first lockdown there was the Getty Museum in America was doing this thing called the Museum Challenge, where people were like, they were asking people to recreate paintings. So we did this one. This was in a Kent Gleaning Day, of this Gleaner's picture, and I did this one, even though I have the Campbell soup can. And then we used the hashtag, the Museum Challenge. So if there's something like that, it's like, maybe what could we add to that conversation? I also think sometimes like really simple things can work. So this is just one I put up where like it was just some elderflower I foraged on my lunch break and just took a picture of it and was like, you know, ideas for elderflower. So it doesn't have to be super complicated. And I'm sure you guys have so much stuff like that, you know, from allotments and things. And I guess that comes back to the not overthinking it and trying to have a conversation and asking people for ideas. You know, then we have a few people respond, so it's like a bit more engaging, a bit more like a conversation. The other one I put in is, can you carve out a niche? This is one of my favorite Instagram accounts. I don't know if other people have seen it. It's called Shit London Guinness. It's by someone from Cork, which is where I'm from. And basically all they do is people submit to them pictures of crap pints of Guinness that they've got in London. But the account's really, really popular, and that's all they do. So there might be something you can do. Another one like that is called Symmetry Breakfast. I don't know if people have seen this one. It is just, they basically post their breakfast, but they always do it like this, so two together. So it's kind of quite, I guess if someone sees that picture, they know that it's that account. So yeah, is there something that on Instagram, because it's so image led, that you want people when they're scrolling through to maybe notice that it's your account? I don't know, is there something that you think might be kind of distinctive that you can do? That I think, and again, might make it easier because you can do everything to that format. And then I've also just written that with Instagram, that obviously it has a lot of features like stories. We were doing Instagram lives a lot in first lockdown to do interviews with different people. You can do them to do like an Ask Me Anything. So just to kind of use the different features that Instagram has as well at the moment can be good, I think. So yeah, I'll stop sharing. Sorry, that was again kind of quite fast, but hopefully useful. So Becca says, what do you think about watermarks? I think they're good. So when we create a social media pack for people, we do tend to watermark the images, just because at least then it's creating, again, some brand recognition if it gets shared a lot more. So I think it is useful to do it.
Do you have a sort of easy way of doing that for people that may not have?
I mean, I think if you can just use something like Canva or, you know, and just put your logo on it. If you're getting your logo, if you have your logo made by someone, just to make sure you ask them for a transparent one so that you can easily put it on different things. And most video editors will let you add your logo at the end or as a watermark. So.
Oh, sorry, Christina, just a quick question. Would you recommend, I don't know if I've asked you this already, I'm getting a bit of deja vu, but would you recommend getting somebody to do your account for you as a small business with little time? Or do you think it's better that it comes from your voice because it's kind of setting the tone for the company and things like that? I get torn.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one. I think it depends a bit on, like, you know, what exactly you're trying to get from social media. But I do think, and, you know, what are the challenges? So if the challenge is you just don't have enough time, then I guess getting someone in. Yeah, and a lot of people, you know, I know they do just get someone to do their social media for them. And I think what's useful is sometimes what I find at feedback is it's not just the time, it's having the kind of brain space to think about social media. Whereas if that's someone's core thing, that's obviously easier. And I guess you can also, I suppose, feed into that person, like, you know, this is what I'm trying to get across. So it's not just like, here's my social media login details, go for it. So yeah, there isn't, I guess, a straightforward answer, but I do think I know a lot of people who, or like, I don't know if you know Toast, who are they're a social enterprise that we work with, and they have a separate social media person, and I think they find it quite useful to just have someone who's like that's their job. And yeah, exactly. They're definitely a bit bigger, so it depends on the budget, I guess, and stuff as well. But it can, I think it's
because I kind of get torn between, do I put an ad out there on my own thing? Do I pay for an ad, or do I pay for somebody else to put the information out there? So it's kind of yeah, trying to get a good balance between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've written a summary of what we want on social media for each of the different sections and what that would look like if we took on a social media coordinator. And it amounted to a huge amount when you listed it. But then you think, haven't I got to think through what I want to say? It's difficult, as you said, Charmaine, as to, are they going to say what you want them to say? You've got to actually feed them almost what it is you want them to say, by which time,
You may
if
well
you
have
get good at
Yeah.
doing social media, you could probably have done it yourself.
Yeah, because we have had, not so much for, but we have, at feedback had say someone come and help us. And I know what you mean. There is a trade-off between, you also have to invest some time in getting the person up to speed. So I guess it depends. Maybe you can get someone who knows a lot about food, who might know a lot about that area already. And I guess there are a lot of people, I think, who have good social media skills and know a lot about food. But, and I suppose the thing could be if you create like a kind of key messaging document, so things that, and a clear guidance of stuff you don't want them to say. And it'd be working out a process, I think, of like, do you have a weekly chat with them where you say, these are the key events this week, or something, and then they go and they manage it. I think the things that take time could be like making images and all that stuff. So if the person can still do that, then that might still be useful, and kind of doing the monitoring. So like looking at the insights and kind of, if that's still quite a good bit of work that maybe if that person can do, or even all the scheduling and stuff and checking it's all right. So it is hard, and I guess it depends how much control sometimes you want to relinquish to someone else, but I think it could be useful to have a dedicated person if you're finding you're not having enough time to do it.
And I think apart from it's not just about relinquishing control, which I fully understand, but it's also the difficulty by which, at least in my very limited experience, it's almost easier to have a person who knows about the topic and less about social media than a social media expert who does know very little about your specific topic, because they might be posting about your specific topic but go quite off track in the type of message are going to push out. So put the case you want to promote healthy food and they speak of pancakes pushing out for Nutella and sugary bits and all that. Did they hit the theme for the day? Yes, they did. Did they get traction? Yes, they did. Did they hit the type of topic you want to promote? Quite off, and then you need to unstitch and restitch back the sort of partial damage done. So
it is tricky, because because some of our campaigns are quite complicated, and I think it would be quite hard to be like, oh, you can say this but don't say it quite quite like that. So I think it would depend, I guess, on how complicated maybe your campaigns are. And I think on the person, like you might have someone who you're like, oh, this person just gets it kind of, and I trust them. But I know what you mean, you might get someone who knows a lot of what they're doing. Because we can all put up those like BuzzFeed videos where they're like, here's how to make a pancake with 4 jars of Nutella or whatever. It will do well, but that maybe isn't what you're trying to get across.
Well, we found it helpful. We have a person who's helping us with the media. So what we tried, and our media is not exactly, I do sometimes Instagram, and then I do the exact case of abandoning for 2 months after having spent 2 weeks every single day on it. But what we try to do, for instance, is to feed the how-to. So if you speak of a topic, try to use this angle and try to do the healthy angle on it, or if it's not healthy angle, try to add a community angle, so at least you can try to craft the spins, at least. If you speak of a theme that's trending, spin it this way rather than that way.
We would do the same at feedback. So we're always trying to bring it back to kind of certain I guess it's that, what are your key messages, so how do you then bring it back to that. So yeah, so for instance, that picture of, say, International Carrot Day, we were like, here are wonky carrots that we're going to get thrown away, and then it's like food waste is bad. So that's a very like core feedback message, where rather than just putting up a picture of carrots and being like, carrots are great, which is fine as well, but you know, it's more specific to what we're trying to get across.
Yeah, and you could have even just put that picture up as a funny one, and then you would have not hit your core message.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the scheduling, so you could actually sit with them and schedule your thoughts for, say, what, once a week, every month, so they know what time they're using.
Yeah, and I guess if you're working with someone else with that as well, you could ask them to schedule everything and put it, what we used to do in my last job was put it in like basically a Google sheet, and then someone would look over it. I mean, you then have the job of having to do that, but at least if you see any really red flag for something, you could highlight that could be a way as well before then they go and actually put it in, because then you just can copy and paste it into.
Yeah, I think after this, I'd probably go back to my coordinator paper and put in my key messages and ask for the analytics to be looked at.
Yeah.
And then define from what my analytics look like now as to where I want to move it to.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you don't know, for instance, how many people, you know, so it will help you, I think, figure that out. And yeah, it's interesting. It's not just being able to use the stuff. For me, this is more what we've just said, the scheduling, the analytics, what are your key messages. Yeah, and even stuff like Facebook ads now, there are literally people who like their job is being an expert at Facebook ads, because we were talking about getting some more training, because I've only done quite basic training on it. So even like that, like that's just one aspect of Facebook, but there are people who's literally are like, I'm an expert at Facebook ads, and they give training on that. So it is, it's definitely like that. There's lots of elements to it. And it's just figuring out where you can, I suppose, get the most back from your input and how you can maximize it.
Yeah,
because I suppose. How much time would you say is a reasonable amount of time to expect someone to put into social media, just for like a small project, for example, where maybe you've got one thing that's running throughout the year, and doing a couple of other sort of promotional events and things like that. What would you say is the reasonable amount for people to sort of expect to spend their time on social media?
It's kind of tough, because I guess it depends, because if you're starting off an account, you probably have to put in a bit more time to kind of establish a follower base and things, and post a bit more consistently. But then, say for instance, on the feedback Facebook page, we have quite a big following now, so we maybe don't have to give as much. But I think if you can carve out at least, say, a few hours a week, even if it's like that in one block, and then maybe try check every day, but if not every day, you know, check in a few times just to make sure no one is going off or anything. And then on certain big days as well. So yeah, so if you know it's World Food Day and you want to do a lot of stuff, maybe I will put aside time to be like, I'm gonna make sure I have a good bit of time that day to be on social media, because I know there's going to be a lot of interaction. So yeah, I think like, again, it's hard to, but I think like, about if you can do a few hours a week, whether that's in kind of one block and then a little bit every day, or you rather do a bit every day, I think you can still probably do. And then I also think it's if you can maybe, like say for Instagram, sometimes I'll just be, even one day I was just going to a social thing for feedback, but I passed someone who'd been doing some urban harvesting and left all these apples out with a sign that said like free apples. So I was like, I'm just going to take a picture of this and put it on Instagram, because it's on brand for us. So it's kind, you know, so if you can, sometimes you just see something and you're like, oh, that would work, and I'll just do it now. It wasn't necessarily planned or whatever, but.
And how do you select your hashtags for Instagram? Sort of the best? Is it just that you start typing it and then you see sort of what it suggests to you as a hashtag, or
so sometimes if we're coming up with a new campaign, we often would say develop a hashtag sometimes, or for an event we might create a hashtag for the event, so that might be something worth doing, and then you try to get other people to use that hashtag as well. Then obviously certain things like yeah, like we'll have, so if you know, if it's World Book Day, there will be a hashtag for that, for any big day like that. But then, yeah, you're right, for other things I would tend, so like we'll often do, say, like food waste, but then sometimes it might come up that, oh, like something like less food waste might also get a lot. So you might, as you said, when you're typing it in, they might, some other things might come up. And I think sometimes that can even just be like having a bit of a brainstorm. So even sometimes I remember once for gleaning posts, the hashtag like volunteering was quite popular. So even though you might think, I mean, it's relevant because there are volunteers going on gleaning days, but it's not the first, I guess, word that comes to mind, maybe when you think of gleaning. But sometimes maybe something a bit more. But I think the only thing I don't think it's worth, sometimes people put in like a random hashtag that has nothing to do with it. It's popular, because then I think when someone looks at it, they'll just be like, well, what, this isn't. So I don't think that's worth doing.
Is there too many hashtags?
I think sometimes, so like, especially as I'm saying on Twitter, I think you don't want that thing where it's just like hashtag, because it's very hard to read. On Instagram, what some people do, is they put in a comment below the picture, lots of hashtags. So it's not, so you can kind of do that. I get, it's worth testing, I think, to see, like, I think sometimes you'll get a bit more, but not massively more. I think it's better to maybe focus on having a few really relevant ones than like loads.
Yeah.
I was on another training thing a couple of years ago, and they were talking about a website called, is it Similar Web? And there was another one, I think, Ask the Web. And basically it comes up, it shows you all the analytics of what people are asking, like the top questions people are punching into Google, so that you can
there's one,
tailor hashtags.
There's one called, I mean, I get addicted to when I go on the site. There might be more than one. There's one I'll put in called Google Trends that you can do that.
That was one of them.
I'll share my
you get
screen.
You get lost in it.
Oh my god, it's addictive. And we were joking because we were, in my last job, we were looking at, like, so say if I put in Christmas, there's like Christmas food. We'll tell you like related topics and stuff, so people, well, this is America, I should change it to UK, but like, yeah, it will, you get it. I find it fascinating to see what people are looking for, or I don't know, I could put in allotment.
Yeah, and then it tells you all the keywords and things like that as well that people have been punching in.
So
like
and there's, I think, is it there is another one, you're right, where you can look at the questions. I remember because once a question came up that was like, it was very American. It was like, how do you make cookies that scream Christmas? And then as a joke around Halloween, I was like, we should write something that's, how do you make a cake that screams Halloween? But then I actually had to write it. They were like, oh yeah, you should do that. I was like, that was a joke. But that can be a good way. And I think sometimes as well, just even like spending some time on Facebook and seeing, and it's obviously curated to like who your friends are and stuff, but if you can try go to different pages, or even like, I mean, Mumsnet and stuff can be quite, to see what questions people are asking there, so you get a bit of an idea of what people are looking for. I think can be good.
How would you go about, obviously that's really good for sort of Google and for social media, but when you have to put tags in for events like on Eventbrite, is there something similar that you can use? Because I know when I've looked at stuff with Sheila before now, to sort of see where the best hashtags are to go, when you're putting together an event so that people searching. Is there anything sort of around a similar sort of format?
Not that I've seen. I'm sure there probably is. I know when you put it in on Eventbrite, it does similar. I think it does come up, right? Because when we were doing that one for International Women's Day, it kind of comes up with the most popular ones. But I don't know if there's this particular tool, but I'm sure there's probably something now. There is for everything, but yeah.
Oh, sorry, Christine, I don't know if it comes under the same topic, but what about live streaming and things like that? I know there's some software and things that you can use like StreamYard and Restream, but would you recommend doing that as well? Because like I know you said it's like behind the scenes type thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. We did a bit in first lockdown, particularly on Instagram, and found it quite good. Got quite a lot of people watching stuff. I think what's particularly good on Facebook as well, if you do a live stream, is if a person follows your page, they'll get a notification that you've gone live. So it's quite a good way of getting people, even if they don't then watch it, to still have your name in their head. So yeah, I think it can be, again, it's a bit of experimenting, but I think we found it can be quite useful. So yeah, it can be good for, as you said, this kind of like I'm at the allotment or whatever, but also we used it for interviewing different people and stuff. And for that, I guess then you just need to do a certain amount of prep and make sure that the person knows what time they have, because I think one day someone like forgot, and there was like a mini panic. But you know, there's always stuff like that with technology. But I think it can be good, and it can be quite a, I guess, low tech way of creating some good content. Yeah, so I think it is useful, and yeah, we've used it a bit and experimented with it a bit. So
that's it, isn't it? Because it's about
yeah, or even if you're cooking something, you know, you might be like, I'm gonna go live pickling whatever this is, and ask people if they have questions. You know, try it and see how you get on. You know, and people might be like, oh, you're pickling something. That's how do you do this? Or
yeah.
Okay,
no, thanks. That's a good idea.
Just my problem would be I try not to like swear or something if I dropped something while I was live.
I'd be dropping absolute everything.
Yeah. That's the problem. Yeah.
Do you have any tips for YouTube? I know a few of us here have put sort of videos that we've created, things like that, on YouTube. And I know Ilaria had an incident where you had loads of views and hadn't done any promotion and things like that. And I just wondered if there were any sort of things that you may have used in the past to sort of maximise YouTube, rather than just having it as somewhere where you can upload your videos and then send links to other places as a sort of a holding folder. Is there a better way of using YouTube to sort of maximise some of our content as an additional sort of platform?
So to be honest, that's something I feel like we haven't done that well at Feedback, and I know Pete, our new colleague, wants to do that. So I could ask him and I can forward stuff on. I guess I would think though that the channels that I think of as doing on YouTube are kind of that thing I was talking about earlier of having a very clear tone of voice. So it's kind of like a very curated selection that is very linked to what you were doing. So it doesn't feel like, because I think sometimes I can feel a bit like a slightly random collection. So it's maybe a bit more like they all have a distinctive look to them. And then I guess thinking a lot about what the title is and what the like holding image and those kind of things just, can be good. But unfortunately, I'm not I think it's a good challenge for us at Feedback. And I know, Pete wanted to do that because at the moment we just tend to kind of put stuff up there and then leave it. But it is obviously a platform in and of itself that people spend a lot of time on.
Yes, I know with younger people as well, YouTube is quite a big, sort of search engine, as much as Google is, that young people are using YouTube a lot more to source sort of information, in video format, as much as, sort of websites or other articles that you might find online. So it's a whole different element to it as well that I think is really interesting for us to see. Were there any other questions at all? I know Christina was going to have a quick look at something that you spoke about in recent meetings, Sheila, around the urban harvest map.
Oh, sorry, yes.
And I think
monthly marketing, a 1 month marketing social media campaign, Christina. I'd heard that a campaign in London used an architect's firm to run it for them.
Okay.
There wouldn't be any of that. It would just be
who was the person in London who did it? What was the organization, or do you know?
I remember the architects, but I thought it was interesting that they just did big hit for a month to do one campaign. So I wondered if you'd any experience of doing that.
Yeah, I think it can be useful in that. So for instance, when we had this BBC appeal, I mean, that wasn't our choice, but it was a week long because that's how they work. But I did think it kind of focused us firstly to make sure we made the most out of it. So what I did is every day we had a kind of different theme. So one day it was, which might be harder to do over a month, but it was a way of kind of making sure the content was a bit different every day, but still on theme. So it was the BBC appeal was mainly about our gleaning network. So one day it was about like food waste on farms, was the theme, and I kind of had stuff related to that. Another day it was about recipes for stuff you glean. So, and then another day it was about like workers on farms and making sure they got like a fair wage. So that was just kind of a way of, I guess, making sure there was relevant content. And I think what was also useful was it created, I suppose, a sense of urgency to it for people, of terms of like, you have to donate by this day. So that was quite good. And I also think in terms of asking other people to share it, so other accounts on social media, it was useful for me to be like, you only have 3 days left. And then, so I think, because I think oftentimes if someone asks me to share something, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll get around to that. Whereas if they're kind of like, the deadline is this day or whatever, I kind of, it does something, I guess, in your brain that you have to do it a bit quicker. So, so yeah, I think those things, could be quite useful. And I guess you're trying to create a bit of a buzz around it. And yeah, if you can have certain moments within the month that you're like, I'm going to highlight this day, I'm going to do this day, and then create a schedule kind of based around that, so you've got content going out consistently over the month.
Would you try to do all areas all the time, or do you think there's benefit in maybe if you had a month, sort of looking at maybe different areas each week, for example, to try and get, I'm just thinking how not to swamp everyone with everything. If you're looking at something sort of on a county level, whether you could sort of do, North Bucks for 1 week and South Bucks and Chiltern and other places.
Yeah, I think
it's worth sort of trying to do things all over, because it's quite fun. People are quite focused on their locality within the county, and it's how to best draw that out, I guess, with people, with interactions, and then actually action. So that call for action, that's really important.
I think that does make sense. You don't want to be kind of bombarding the same people. So that's why I think having a kind of variety of content over the month can be good. So I obviously don't know as much about books as you guys do, but if you think that would make sense, or like I said, there might be a way of one day you focus on people who have allotments or into growing, one day it's maybe like family groups, or there might just be a way of doing it that way, so you're kind of hitting different groups with different content.
So could you go for sort of 1 week, you might go for sort of people who are outdoors, or walkers, or that sort of thing, or do you think it's better to go for maybe different audiences?
It's kind of like, how long is I hate that phrase, how long is a piece of string? It's not helpful. It's hard to know without testing it, but I think just I suppose it's it's kind of what do you want people to do, and who do you think is most likely to do it, and then just focus on those people. So it's you want people to input into this map, right, where there are a few fruit trees. So who do you think the people who are going to be willing to do that are? And then if you're going to use social media, where do you think those people, and maybe do some research, like, are they on Facebook, or would they be on Instagram, or what's going to be the best way? Or, as you were talking about last week, you might think it's better to have pictures, posters up around places or something. So I think it's just focusing really on who your audience is, and where they are, and then what you think will appeal to them to get them to do it.
And I guess with something like that, not everyone would know what the trees are until they actually bear the fruit. So I think having maybe a bit of an identification sort of element to it as well, to say this is what the leaf of a cherry tree looks like, or, you know, those sort of things. I don't know if that's something that may be useful or not.
Yeah, I guess what I think is also, I was doing something similar, you know, at the moment. I mean, you've done this for us before, Becca. We sometimes at Feedback ask people to go to supermarkets and kind of do like a survey around, like, say, meat or fish. But I think sometimes what I always do when I'm doing one is I just go, I think about the questions, but then I actually go to the supermarket and then try to do it as if I'm the person. Because when you're typing up the questions, it's very easy to say, like, what percentage of meat has a RSPA label? And then when you're in there, you're like, I can't do, like, the staff are staring at me. So actually think about, like, if I was a person, what would be the barriers, as you said, like one, and then I try to like make it as simple. So it might be more like, what's your impression? Like, can you easily figure out what meat is high welfare or something? So it's not like, so it's easier or whatever. So because even sometimes when I go into a supermarket, I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't think about the fact that there's meat in one section, and then there's meat in the deli section, and then there's meat in the freezer. So do I want someone to check all those things? So I think, you want to think about it from the perspective of that person actually doing it. And then, figure out, like, and that might be even, asking like a friend or testing on someone. I think I was saying that before, that sometimes if I make a video, I'm not sure if the message is quite clear, I get a friend who's not a Feedback to watch it. So maybe even testing something on with someone, and they might say, the issue is I wouldn't know what tree it was, or I'd be worried it was the wrong one, or whatever. I mean, maybe it could be fun to create some sort of family kit where kids have to identify the tree or something, based on some, would children do that? Some sort of activity where you have to identify as many trees as you can or something.
Well, maybe forest school leaders might be inclined to do something like that, if they're taking the children out and they've already identified them, just asking them to log in and put them on the map.
Yeah, or is there a way in how you're recording it? Like, can you say, this person has identified 7 trees, and whoever identifies the most wins a box hamper or something? I don't know. Is there a way you can do something like that to make it a bit more like a game, or a bit funner or something?
They'll probably give them a bottle of apple juice, Richard.
That's not a bad idea.
Yes, it isn't, is it?
And you had some seeds, someone said last week as well, right? Apple juice and seeds.
Yeah, the seeds are easier to post than a bottle of apple juice.
And I guess similar to that then, so something that might work well on social media might be a video of someone doing it, of someone, seeing a tree, and I don't know how it works. Do you take a picture of it or whatever, and being like, look, it's this simple, this is all you do, and then putting that, say, on Facebook or Instagram or something, and promoting that to people might be an easy way of showing that it's quite simple and it doesn't take that long. Because I find that's what I think people are often put off by. They're like, well, you say it'll take this long, but so if you have something that actually shows it's really not that hard or whatever, maybe that would work. And if you could get a few different people to do it.
I wonder if you create a specific Google Maps. For instance, I've recently seen one for the bike hangers they've just put up in a borough in London, and you can use the same system of posting. It's like if you treat each tree as it was a venue, and people can check in, post pictures. So you have pictures at different time of the year. So you can show what it looks like in January, in March, when it's budding, when it's in full bloom in the summer, etc. And you can have the same as reviews. You could be a super reviewer because you identified 20 trees, or, but it would be a good way to use a system that's already there, like Google Maps, and you create your own personalized Google map.
Need a scout troop. You need to get a badge together for
a tree badge.
Nice. I like that.
Foraging.
I've got the commander on the allotment who is the Sea Scout commander. So I don't know how many little Sea Scouts he's got, but we could send them off into the woods, couldn't we?
And
Off
little
you
crumbs
go.
of bread.
Yeah.
Can I have little crumbs of bread to find the way back?
Yeah.
But I guess also now is a good time, right? Because you can't do anything other than be outside. I don't know when you're launching it. You know what I mean? I'm thinking like I would probably do this now because I'm like, well, there's nothing else really I can do in lockdown other than be outside. So I may as well be identifying
Phrase.
trees. So I think that can be another thing as well of like making it relevant to people. You know, it could be like, are you stuck? Are you bored in lockdown?
Or
Do you
maybe-
want to help us identify some trees?
Maybe monthly when the elderflower is on, so that's
Yeah.
elderflower month.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, that
October's
could be nice too.
elderberry month. Can you
I
put
think that'd be
elderberries
really
on?
nice.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think oftentimes people, they miss a certain thing like that, and then they're like,
Yeah.
oh, I really wish I had, you know, because you know, some things come really quickly. So yeah,
But
that's
it's
a nice
like,
idea.
I remember last year I was looking for wild garlic and I went when it was in bloom. So I could
Yes.
identify it. And then I remember when it was, I went this year when it was not in flower yet. And I could have never recognized it if I hadn't seen the flowers last year.
Yeah.
So
and
if you use
smelt it.
something as obvious, it was very tiny and in the dog enclosure, but that's another story. But if you have something as obvious as the flowers, which are immediately identifiable, then that's the trigger to recognize then the tree and start using it.
I suppose feedback won't mind if the project's in place, even if it's not completed, but it's in place to be identified by October, because it finishes in June, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think with something like that, I think that if you've got, you know, I think the whole thing with Urban Harvest that we're looking at anyway is hopefully getting some more funding for the project. It's definitely something that's beneficial, you know, all year round. So I think if you've got, you know, your systems and a lot of the posts and things could be created. So those don't, you know, you can find pictures even if you haven't taken the pictures yourself.
Yes.
And things like that. So I think all that sort of thing is definitely something that isn't as timely as it needs to be sometimes, just to do the preparation around
So
things like that.
would you use social media to find our imaginative stakeholders for what to do with all the residential produce, or is that not a good use of social media?
I know obviously what we're doing now is that we've started to invite people for the Urban Harvest Hackathon / round table in order to try and get a diverse range of people to sort of put their ideas forward. So the idea around a hackathon is usually used by IT companies for development to get different people's ideas. And it's something that O2 have done with with children and young people in schools, to try and get different sort of point of views on sort of development of technology or schemes or projects.
Right.
So I think from that, hopefully some ideas will come out that would be follow up with things like that, because it's having that focus and going, okay, well, this is what we're going to do, this is the way we're going to drive it, this is how we're going to fund it, and these are the people that have all pledged that they're going to help us to cook up 12 vats of poached pears or whatever it might be. So
so I wondered, I've got a restaurant in Beaconsfield which is very expensive, and he said he'll help me in any way I want, just ask him. So I just wondered whether a restaurateur or the chef would be somebody that would be useful in a hackathon, or is cooking it not what we're after? But you don't know who they know, do you, that might
definitely.
have an innovative idea.
We've got one guy who works with us in the North team who today has said he's able to come along. So Keenan, who sort of controls the kitchen and that sort of thing in the Alchemic Kitchen. And so I believe, Christine, you probably know better than me, they sort of take a lot of different things that are food waste sort of focused and turn them into sauces and things like that. And obviously we've got Charmaine will be on that call as well. So it's really just to get people with different levels of experience to go, well, yeah, that should be possible for us to, you know, make chewy apple snacks or something out of all of those, and have an idea about how long that might take. Then if you've got someone there who might be like, and you could market it through schools, or, you know, just to
Have I got to go on Dragon's Den then next?
Pardon?
Have I got to go on Dragon's Den next?
Well, you never know. part of Buck's Dragon's Den.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think, you know, I mean, I know you've had some success with things with LinkedIn and putting out for volunteers for different things, and I think it's just about capturing people's attention, you know, for them to make that connection, go, actually that's something I'd like to be involved in, or I have certain skills, I can, you know, help you design a food label or whatever it may be, that other people you can get on board to.
We haven't covered LinkedIn, have we?
Ways.
No, we haven't. I was saying someone else at Feedback manages the LinkedIn, so if anyone has any questions, they can pop them over
I remember
to her.
you mentioned it, but I didn't think we'd said anything. So yeah, you think I'd just put it out there and on LinkedIn?
Yeah, if you have a good network on there and you've gotten a good response before, I would say that's good.
Yeah, I think like today I put the hackathon on my LinkedIn to see if we get any interest from different people. Obviously you might want to be a bit selective with people that might go, yes, I'd like to be involved, but they may not, you know, they could be in a different part of the world and, you know, their reality is a little bit different. So I think it's choosing what sort of people you want to target with that, to sort of put it out there. And you don't want loads and loads of people, you know, you want a select few rather than lots of different walks of life. That may mean, because I mean, hackathons can go on for like 3 days if you do it sort of like IT tech style, and we're doing it in like, you know, 3.5 hours. So ours is a very concise, watered down version of it, and probably the start of other conversations, but at least to get some ideas down. I think it'd be really good to see what people can contribute or what they've heard about in different areas that have worked. So, and I'm aware that we want, you know, to build the capacity, not just the work, because otherwise you'll be developing a lot of other skills, you know, needing, you know, extra.
Richard will go. He'll just go to tending his allotment if I do anything else.
Well, yes, it's. I think the tending the allotment is the easy bit compared to all the social media stuff.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
I think what's been really nice about a lot of things, you know, whether it's been people getting used to putting things, you know, doing webinars on Zooms or putting things on social media, is just something that, you know, you try it. You may have a few little hiccups along the way, or things aren't posting right, or the link doesn't work. You know, everyone's been there and everyone's done it, you know, on a small scale, because everyone hasn't been trained in it or done a master's degree or something. So I think the more people, you know, the more you do it, then the more sort of familiar it becomes, and that actually, you know, it won't be such a chore over time.
I can't tell you how inordinately pleased I am that the Eventbrite went well twice. And I just have my fingers crossed that the third one will go well as well.
Yeah. I was going to show my age and ask that question to say, well, what is it that motivates you to put stuff on social media? And I guess you probably answered that, Becca, by saying that it's, you know, it's the feedback you get, and when things go well, and the more you do of it, the easier it gets. But you know, it's not something that comes naturally to me. And is it something that, is that just because I've got lots of grey hair, or is it just that, you know, it's something that appeals more to some people than others?
I think some people, and certain people definitely prefer other platforms like to others. So some people really like Twitter, and some people, you know, really prefer Instagram. But I think I just think of it on social, like it's something that I say, if I read a really good thing from a good article and I want to share it because I think other people should read it. And I think if it can come across that way, that you were like, this was really good and other people should see it, or, you know, we have a really good gleaning day and the pictures are, you can tell everyone's had a really good time, then I think that stuff kind of comes across well. Rather than you're like, oh, I've got to do a post because I have to do a post and I don't really care about, which I definitely do sometimes, but I think, you know, like if you can try find stuff that you feel a bit more maybe like, oh, this is really good.
Yes, I can see that, and I can see if you've got a good story to tell, then you want to tell it, don't you? I wonder sometimes whether there's also a benefit in putting out some fairly mundane stuff from time to time, or just to generate a bit of variety, because you know, if you wait until you've got a good story, and that's every 3 months or something, then, you know, it's a bit intermittent. and probably, you know, again, you can tell I don't use social media enough to really sort of know, but I'm wondering whether, you know, posting other stuff in between is beneficial to keep a site more active, or whether it's better just to wait until you have got those big stories.
No, I think it is. And I also think stuff that like we might think is mundane might be really interesting to someone else. So, like, I don't know much about allotments or growing. So even like how to, you know, take care of a tomato or something, like how to prune a tomato plant or something, might actually be really, you know, to someone who doesn't know how to do that. And the same with cooking, like even, you know, like really say on Pancake Day, that's like the biggest day for food and social media. Like even a really simple formula for how to make pancake batter, so like that might seem, oh, that's really boring, but actually for someone who's never made pancakes before, that could be really interesting. So yeah, I think oftentimes, or even I find that with feedback, I'm like, oh, everyone knows the statistic about food waste, but it's like, well, they don't actually. You know, because we know it because we're saying it all the time. And the same with, like, you know, there's probably stuff about gardening or seasonal food or whatever that you're like, everyone knows this, but actually oh well, people love compost.
Loves compost.
No, like, but we had, I mean, back in the days we had an event in LA, compost was the cool thing everyone in LA was talking about. So so yeah, again, something that maybe you think, oh, this isn't that exciting. I think if it's clear that you're interested in it and you're communicating in a way that way, I think it will still come across, you know.
Yeah, and I guess if it doesn't, well, so be it. It's just a post, and
like that's a thing, as I think as Becca was saying, I think a lot of it is trial and error. Sometimes, like I used to remember when I used to tweet about Bake Off in my old job, I'd always have a tweet that I was like, this one, everyone's gonna love it, and sometimes those ones got nothing, and then one that I was like, oh, whatever, people like went crazy. So there's an element of just, you don't know sometimes why a certain thing, and maybe afterwards you're like, okay, this is why people liked it. But yeah, I think you just have to try some stuff. And yeah, if you don't like, you know, unless you're spending thousands on a video or something, which you maybe need to try. But if it's just something small and people, then you can just play around with it a bit, I think. And that's it, have a kind of slightly experimental view. Because yeah, I've definitely put some stuff up before, and people have been like, no, not. So I was trying, I remember once, to Karina, mine and Becca's overall boss exec director, I took like an excerpt from one of her speeches, and people were literally like in the comments like, what does this mean? Because it wasn't very clear. So I was like, okay, note to self not to do that again. So, you know, but then I have also been surprised that I put something up that maybe I thought people wouldn't respond as well to, and they have, sometimes even more, maybe more technical graph or something, but people have actually engaged with it. So yeah.
Where do you think it's best to look for stats? Only that I know, obviously with food waste, you know, there's a lot of stats out there. Not a lot of them are UK based, or there's some key ones that are. And from organisations that may want to share stats or make infographics and things like that, are there particular places that you do trust with stats, rather than just maybe retweeting or reposting something from someone else that you don't particularly know if it's accurate?
Yeah, I definitely find if I see something that I'm like, what, that seems off, I will like double check it or try to see where the source is from. So for, if you wanted food waste ones, I think particularly for household food waste, WRAP in the UK is probably the best. That I would say that's pretty trusted. And then more general food stuff, like, you know, the FAO, which is the like food wing of the UN. Like, so you kind of want, I always want to feel like I want to be able to say, if someone questions me, like, where's that stat from, that I can give them a source that I can feel like I can stand behind. I think that's better than, I definitely see some kind of dodgy stats out there sometimes. So yeah, I think you want to feel like if someone questions you on something, you'll be able to answer it. And actually that's sometimes, which may be slightly less relevant, but if we're publishing a new report or piece of research that I know there's going to be a bit of pushback on, I will often draft a kind of social media thing that's like, questions will get asked and then answers, so they're just ready to go. So we had a campaign called the Pig Idea which is about trying to make it legal to feed food waste to pigs. And every single time you post about that, you'll get someone being like, no, it's not safe, or we should all be vegan, or the same things kept coming up, and it was taking quite a lot of energy to always reply to people. So then we just created a document which is like, these are the questions we get asked all the time, and these are the responses, and then you just have to kind of like copy and paste and sometimes tweak it a little. But and then once, which I feel because a miracle, a man was like, this is unsafe, and I responded with the response, and he was like, oh, I didn't know that, oh, I guess you're right. And I was like, I've changed a man's mind on the internet. Like, anything is possible. So I think, yeah, I think I wouldn't post something if you don't feel like you have, and similar, if I see a stat and I think I'm not sure, I think it's better to ask to ask, or so maybe like to clarify, like, where is, if they haven't said where it's from, to be like, where is that from, maybe before sharing it.
And I know it's something that we've spoken about locally, about content, because there seems to be a lot of content that may be from the States, particularly from the UK. So in that instance, do you just use things that are from the States? You know, if you're putting together presentations, things like that, or would you just stay clear and try and make it relevant to the UK?
I think it depends. Like, if the overall message you think would still be relevant. So I don't know if people, like, I often share articles from Civil Eats. It's like, I don't know if people come across that. It's US based, so they do have stuff from across the world, but sometimes the message might be about like, whoa, community supported agriculture is good, so that's kind of relevant. But if it's about like the farm bill in America, I'm like, well, that's probably not as relevant. So I guess it depends. If it's a kind of a universal story that you're like, well, I think this is still relevant to people here, but if it's a very, very specific to that context, then not as much. But it could also, you could frame it in a way of, you know, oh, isn't it great that they're doing that in this country? Why can't we do that here? So it's different ways of framing it, I guess. But I would be conscious of, not posting lots of things that people might click on and be like, well, that's great for them over there, you know. So yeah.
Right.
How in sync should your sort of Facebook, if you're doing a media campaign, I know Ilaria did this really well with the Gluts book, should you repeat content on different social media channels, or should you sort of tailor and keep sort of content separate for different channels? Yeah.
I think it's okay to repeat content. I just think it's maybe, it would be, sometimes I think for us on feedback, that maybe the way we frame it's slightly different across the channels. It's maybe like a bit more informal on, say, Instagram than Twitter or something, but we often would use similar content. So I think, I don't think you have to kind of worry about creating way more work for yourself. But yeah, you just maybe sometimes think, or there's certain things I'm like, oh, if it was a very, for us, say like a very specific policy position paper, we might just put that on Twitter and not really put it on Facebook. So it might depend whether you think it's useful in different places. But I think you can, and I was saying earlier, just like try do the images so you have like the right format for Twitter and Instagram. But I think you can kind of use very, very similar stuff. You don't need to be too stressed about creating totally different things.
In terms of the sort of immediacy of different channels, I mean, obviously a web page is for more long-term stuff, and Facebook and then the rest. I sort of figure Facebook, Instagram, they're all much of a muchness in terms of the speed of communication. Would you agree with that, or do you think there's some things where you would put information that might change every week, and other places where you put things that were changing more rapidly?
I guess, Twitter, obviously, like, stuff doesn't stay. It depends how much you're posting, so how quickly things will turn around. I guess. But I think, And you can also then do stuff like we would sometimes on Twitter, you know, you can pin a tweet to the top. So for like, this is the key thing we want people to go on, we're going to make sure that's up there. So yeah, it kind of just depends, I suppose. But yeah, for long-term things, I guess, yeah, something like putting it on a website is probably the best. But there are ways you can put stuff on, you can put it in certain places in social media that it will kind of stay there all the time. But yeah.
Yeah, so probably website at one end and Twitter at the other end, and the other channels somewhere in the middle. Okay. Do we do? Sorry, it's all right. No, carry on, Becca.
I was just going to say, some websites you can have sort of the sharing where you have like Twitter or Instagram feeds or Facebook feeds appear up on the website. Is that worthwhile? Because I know different websites can change. So like Wix have taken away the plugin to have social media sort of streaming on the websites and things like that. Is it a good thing? Or so Feedback has the news section, which actually is the sort of the bloggy, the sort of news stuff that may be similar to what's on social media, but maybe in more content form on a particular place on the website. What are the pros and cons of maybe linking up with social media, or is the news section a better approach?
Yeah, so it's interesting because when we redeveloped our website, we used to have the widget for Twitter, and the website developers kind of suggested not to have it because I think it would crowd it. And we also were talking about, you know, the way sometimes when you go on a website, there's those buttons that kind of pop up to be like, bring you to Twitter. And we were like, yeah, we need to have that. And then they were like, when's the last time you clicked on one of them on someone's website? And I was like, yeah, actually, I don't think I ever have. So they very much strongly advised us off it. So yeah, I think it can look a bit crowded, I guess, on the page. So that's why we decided then not to do it. But maybe it depends on like if you're very, very active on Twitter and you think it's really important to have it there or something, maybe you would. But yeah, I'm not sure how many people will like, I don't think I've ever really got on a site and then scrolled through their Twitter on it. I would tend to go to Twitter if I wanted to look at their tweets. So I think that's a lot of times it's like, I'm obviously you're like me, I'm not like representative of everyone, but maybe think about like when they asked us that, they're like, when was the last time you clicked on one of those? And I was like, yeah, actually I never have. And they said from their experience, people don't tend to click on them, those kind of pop-up buttons that much. So I think it's maybe easier to just have it like either at the bottom or the top, so people can find, if they want to find your Twitter, they can find it from the website easy enough, but you're not necessarily trying to like have it like stuck on there.
I know it isn't something that we've really talked about in these meetings, but things like newsletters, collecting people's details, things like that. Is it best just to do that from your website, or should you try and do it from social media? And how does that link, you know, if you wanted then to have a database, what would you suggest is the best way for people to compile newsletters in order to sort of keep communication up with maybe people that are supporting them, or maybe people that are particularly active, you know, in gardening, or maybe going to volunteer like that? What would you suggest?
So I think, yeah, it'd be good to have a forum on the website, but I think especially if you're trying to start a list and doing something like a very standard message or image, and then doing some, say, sponsored ads on Facebook to try build it up. And then there are lots of tools you can use. So we use one called Engaging Networks, but that's quite expensive because it has a lot of campaigning things, where we used to use one called Action Network for sending out emails, which is a lot cheaper and easier. And then people obviously, like there's MailChimp, there's loads of different ones. So it's kind of a matter of figuring out, like if you just want to send email, something like MailChimp would probably be fine. Engaging Networks and Action Network let you do stuff like petitions and events and stuff as well. So it kind of depends exactly what you want. But I do think, yeah, email can be really effective. And oftentimes we get the most response from our email list. So that can be, I think, a way of if you're kind of communicating fairly consistently with them and providing kind of good content in the emails, that can be a way of kind of more, because I feel like I'm oftentimes maybe more likely to open an email from someone than to see their post online. So it can be a bit of a more direct way, but yeah, it does involve I guess a bit of work in a different way. You have establishing the list, and then there's obviously GDPR. There's some data protection stuff you have to be like aware of. But it's not that complicated. And then writing the emails and sending them out. But if you have, I think, a core group that you want to communicate with, and you think they would be up for like getting those emails, it can be quite a good way as well of reaching those people quite directly, because most people check their emails multiple times a day, but at least every day, in a way that maybe not everyone goes on or it will see as much stuff on social media, because it's more of a crowded space, I guess.
Mentioning, you were talking about MailChimp there, Christina. I mean, Sheila and I tried to use that last year and we gave up, basically.
Oh, really? I've never actually used MailChimp. I've used 3 different ones here, but never MailChimp, because someone told me it was easy to use, but you didn't find that now, or?
Well, we concluded.
Tommy, where are you? You were involved in this.
I was. It was a bit strange. I think they've changed quite a lot, hadn't they, when we went in there? But yeah, I've used it a few times and it hasn't been too bad. But yeah, I haven't been back in there since, actually. So it was beginning of last year.
We thought perhaps it had changed since we'd both used it, but I don't know if it was just
maybe
it correctly.
But in my memory of MailChimp, that is very complicated at the very beginning to understand how you get to set up a template and make it so it works for your organization, and then build a group of people to send it to. But once you've done the first hurdle, then it's very easy to maintain. But it's just not very immediate as a first interface. So every time I use it, every 6 months, it's kind of, how did I do it? And I never remember.
Where it's, maybe that's one where it's, because for Engaging Networks, when we did, they like set up a template and everything for us. So maybe it's, if you want to do an email list, maybe it's worth paying someone to do the initial setup and go through it with you. Because a lot of them, what I found is that once once you have a template, it's kind of just a matter of putting the text in the email. And once you know how to select, and especially if you're only going to have at feedback, sometimes we have a couple of different lists, but if you're only going to have one mailing list, then you can't really go that far wrong, I guess. But as you said, the initial setup can be a bit, so yeah, it might be worth just getting someone to set it up.
I think we're doing one for Bucks Food Partnership, so we'll let you know how that works out.
Oh, right. So who knows about MailChimp in the food partnership?
Pardon?
Who knows about MailChimp in the partnership?
I believe that may well be something I'm looking at with Tejo. So it's something that we've got to put together.
I was going to say, I did all that mental health first aid training, and I paid Dawn Newton from Wendover. Funnily enough, Wendover keeps featuring in everything at the moment, doesn't it? And she set up our MailChimp for our suite of courses, and she showed me how to do it. It seemed eminently simple at the time, but 3 years later, Richard and I could not make it work, could we? We were sure they'd changed the whole setup, and that was why I couldn't do it.
Yes,
it probably wasn't.
The instructions seem to bear no relationship to what we were saying on the screen.
Yeah.
But yes, good luck, Becca.
But yeah, you could just pay Dawn to do it.
We'll give it a go, and if it's something master, then of course we'll always share it with you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes, I still find it quite daunting. It's, as you say, you have to keep doing it, Ilaria, or otherwise it becomes too time consuming, doesn't it, to keep remembering what you did last.
It really is a matter of setting it up, because funnily enough, what I mentioned before was setting it up for 3 different organizations. So every time we're starting from scratch, and that was the most difficult part. Once that's set up, it really is straightforward, because you can always use the same template. So you have the title on top, and then an image, and then a bit of text, and then maybe a button, and then another bit of text, and it's drag and drop, so it's easy to move about. It's just the very first bit that is time consuming, and not. Anyway, it might take a little bit of time to orientate yourself.
Yeah, we use MailChimp with Eventbrite. So that was the first time I'd used Eventbrite, but it seemed to sync together very well.
Mhm.
But that was because she was doing it.
Yeah, I seem to remember when we tried to use it, we'd set up a template and we put some material into it. So we actually started preparing a newsletter, but we couldn't actually work out how to send it to anybody.
That's what it's almost a
Crucial
catch
step.
22. So you need to create a list of people to send it to before you create
Yeah,
your
we've done that.
newsletter.
We've done that. Yeah.
No.
No, we decided that weeding was actually pretty exciting.
Yeah. And turning the compost was even better.
Yes.
Oh dear. Yeah. Well, let's hope we get there.
Yeah.
I know Becca's phone number anyway. Oh dear.
You learn together.
I know,
Exactly.
you seem to learn it quite easily, don't you?
Well, it helps if one has youth on one side, I think.
Yeah, that's my excuse.
I just as a slight aside, I did some French lessons, started about 10 years ago. It was an evening class, and there were a group of ages in the class. Most of us at the time, I suppose, were in our late 40s. And there was one lady who was, I think she was 70, and she had, each week the same thing got explained and she was struggling to pick it up. And there was another lady who joined who was in her 20s. She just started as a teacher at the RGS, and she only came to about every fourth lesson, but she still just picked stuff up so much more quickly. And it just, brought it home to me how much easier things like that are to pick up when you're younger.
Yeah.
And I'm sure social media comes into the same category. Anyhow, that's my story.
Yeah.
And now I'm not still very good at French because I moved away for work and I stopped going to the classes. And again, like social media, when you stop speaking the language regularly, then it's no longer is prominent in the brain.
Yeah. You have to go and live there, Richard. Get yourself
Yeah, well,
a holiday home.
I worked in Mali in West Africa for a month. And that's French speaking. Yeah, and my French really improved a lot when I was doing that, because when you're working and you're having to speak and write French, as the language you're using every day, all the time, it just embeds it into the brain a lot better. So yes, absolutely, live in the country. That's the best way to learn.
Are there any other questions for Christina around social media?
Yeah, sorry, I realized we didn't take a break, but I guess we're almost done. I planned to take a break, but anyway.
Or is everyone?
Just a quick one, actually. Sorry. If you want to tag in another account, say if you're using a particular product or something when you're cooking, do you think that's a good thing to do to kind of raise awareness generally, or do you think it looks a bit stalkerish if you do it too many times? I can understand once, but
yeah, I think no, I think like we do it quite a lot. Especially if you have like a relationship with the person. I think actually like people aren't going to be angry that you're like promoting their product. But yeah, like if I don't know, like, some on Twitter, for instance, like if I try tag Nigella Lawson or something, I don't actually think she lets you be tagged in pictures now. She's probably sick of everyone tagging her. They might just be like, who's this random account I've never interacted with? But I think, I think particularly if it's a smaller brand or a local brand, I think most people are really like, are quite happy that you're doing that and will often share it. So, yeah, we've definitely done that a good bit and it's come across well. But I think, there's probably I feel like, a limit sometimes how much goodwill I can, if I've tagged someone a few times a week, I'm like, okay, I'll leave Sheila Dillon alone now, or, whatever. You don't want, you want to tread the line between annoying someone as well. But I think, again, as long as it's relevant and, I think most, especially if it's a small business, would be happy to be tagged in something, especially if you're using their product in a positive, in a positive way. They want to see that, and
Right then, thanks.
Is that the same for feedback, sort of as a funder? And I know, you know, I do posts with one of my jobs, and we tag a funder in, or you know, on Instagram, things like that. I mean, it for me, it's as much about showcasing what you're doing. You know, so you've got that sort of as a bit of a record as well to say, okay, well, I've been posting all these allotment pictures, you know, during the project, things like that. Just so it's showing the funder that you're doing what you said you were going to do, but also then you've got that sort of record as well. Is that something that you think is useful from that sort of point of view, or do you think it could be detrimental?
No, I think it is useful. Some funders actually will say to us, like, you have to tag us in every, so for one, they'll say that. And I also think, again, like, they want to see people doing stuff, and especially some bigger funders like Big Lottery Fund or whatever, if some of them have quite big accounts, and they'll often then maybe retweet, because they want to showcase that their projects are doing stuff. So it can be a good way of maybe like getting yourself in front of and kind of, you know, like sometimes a bit of goodwill as well. Sometimes we'll share funders stuff if we're applying for funding from them, just, you know, or often like Megan, our fundraising corner, like, do we follow these people on Twitter? Can we make sure we do? And like some of their, you know, just so yeah, I definitely don't think that hurts. Yeah. As I said, maybe you don't want to do like 10 posts a day that you tag them into, but
I know feedback does it. How do you repost things from Instagram? So if there was a project or a campaign that you really liked as an organisation, how do you do the sort of the reposting? Do you have to have a particular I don't know, app for that?
Yeah, so what we normally tend to do is we share it to our story, which you don't need an app for, and then we might maybe put in a bit of text like, check out this project this person's doing. But if you want to actually ever post, I think, yeah, there's different apps you can find that will let you do that, and it will come up like you've used this app, so people, I think, can tell you didn't, it's not your post. Okay. So yeah, but we tend to just share the stories, or else sometimes if we're part of, like I was saying earlier, like a coalition or something, they might send us images and be like, can you put this on your Instagram? And then we'll put that on and tag them in to say, you know, Food Tank is doing this live summit, and we use the image that they asked us to use. So
that's similar to like what you'd get in a media pack. So if
yeah,
so they'd give you something, an image to share, and maybe
and they might be like, can you use this hashtag or whatever. So yeah. Yeah, I feel like, because Instagram doesn't have as much functionality as others and certain things like that, but then it feels like for everything you could maybe want to do, there's someone who's created an app to let you do it. So yeah, I think there's there's apps to help you like schedule it for later, because Instagram doesn't let you do that itself. And then there's apps that you can there's often a workaround for Instagram, but it's not often built into the actual thing itself.
Any last questions?
It's all about doing it.
Yeah.